Okay, so first I'll show you how you can generate one of two Gridshell shape options that I want you to look at. The reason I look at these options is because A, I can ensure that they're doubly curved, although you have two different sort of ways of looking at it. And two, I can ensure that it's the right scale so things actually fit in the laser cutter bed for you, okay? So I'm gonna give you this Grasshopper file called Shell Surface Options, right? That's one of the downloads for you today, for this week, basically. There's also a RhinoScript file. We'll talk about how to run that and show you what it does in order to automate the generation of your rib system, your sort of two-way grid shell. So once you have that geometry, right, and then it's about breaking it up in components. Instead of making trusses, what we're gonna do is we're gonna make that rib system, and then with RhinoScript, and then in Grasshopper, you'll actually apply and populate it with your shading components. Okay? I sort of teased that at the end of last time we met, right? I sort of made a shell surface and then plugged my one component in, and it made like a 10 by 10 matrix of them across the surface. And then last, there's another download called Lunchbox Tools. It's a plugin that runs over top of Grasshopper. It's from a company called Proving Ground. It's a free download. You can download it, install it. There's some instructions in case you need it. I will preface that with, I think it's built on the .NET plugin in C#, and so it'll only run on the Windows version of Rhino and Grasshopper. So if you have a Mac, for just this step where you want to unroll everything, you can either do that manually in Rhino, unroll it, but if you want to do that all in Grasshopper, you might just need to go to a machine that has Windows. The computer labs down the hall, has a bunch of Windows machines. Actually, they're iMacs like this, but they run dual boot. They can run the Mac OS or Windows. And so you can run Rhino there and install it there just temporarily, just to do that step if you'd like. Or you can just use a friend's or family member's laptop. You know, I don't know how you guys work. Back in the old days, not that long ago, but it seems like a million years ago, to you guys probably before you were born, I don't know. We would like do things together, and like especially if there were hard, difficult things, we would do it in groups, and that way we could sort of rely on each other to sort of figure things out. I don't know if you guys do that anymore or not. Maybe you guys are all just working from home. I know we've had a pandemic, once in a 100-year pandemic since then, everything else. So, but just to sort of let you know, right there, those are the 4 files that you need to download for this week. And sooner rather than later, right? So I'm just going to go through these, but these are what I'm going to refer to in the demo today. If we get through all the steps today, that's perfect, because then on Wednesday, you can basically just sort of work on this in class, and I can just sort of, float around and help you out if you have any problems, right? Or you can come in with any difficulties you've had, so I can help you troubleshoot and debug. If we need to take a little time on Wednesday to continue or finish this up, we can, right? So anyway, with that said, boom. So you've been designing a component, but we've been talking about grid shells, and so now, what we're going to do is we're going to generate the grid shell. This is that shell surface classifications Grasshopper graph that you can download from my Google Drive with that link. Let's just talk about this just a moment. What it's doing is basically just using Notepad, and I'm just sort of solving for x, y, and z point coordinates, right? So in other words, I'm setting up a function for x, a y coordinate, and a z coordinate. If I plug those in, I can start to generate a bunch of points, right? And so what I can do is I can say, well, x will equal x, whatever I plug in for x, y will equal whatever I plug in for y, and z will always be the cosine of x plus the sine of y. Now, what do cosines and sines do? You guys remember those from trig? Algebra 2, advanced unified math, whatever they called it, pre-calc. Sine, cosines, what do they do? What does a sine wave do? Why is it called a sine wave? Hint, hint. It oscillates back and forth, up and down between the minimum and maximum. So the farther you step in x and y, it just goes up and back down, and up and down, and up and down, right? And if we do that three-dimensionally, right, instead of just getting a wave curve, we get a wavescape. Hot damn, look at that. That's like geometric incredibleness right there. All right, so, and that's simply all I do, right? Then I plug in values for x and values for y, going from 0 to 4 pi, right? which if you remember is the sort of minimum maximum for these things, right? And so again, I can go 0 to 4 pi for each revolution, oscillation. I can cross-reference those things together, and I just basically plug them in to x, y, and z coordinates. I'm doing a few other things, right? I can basically, with this, make things steeper or smaller, right? Larger or smaller, that step size. Just leave it the way it is, right? The way I have it set here will ensure that everything fits within that 18 by 32 basic curve edge. You screw around with that, you screw around with like getting things done, right? And getting it done in a way that the scale is big enough that you can manipulate the chipboard, but small enough that it can fit in that laser cutter bed. All right, so essentially all I'm doing is making this wavescape surface, and then I'm just basically sampling just two different portions of it right here at the very end, right? So here's all the math and trig that we talked about. We plug it into a set of points, makes a grid of points. We plug that grid of points in to make a surface. And then we just sample. We can sample this one, which is dome-like, the double curvature, the curve in the U and the curve in the V are going in the same direction, right? Or you can sample this one, right? Which is still doubly curved, but the curvature in the U direction is going opposite the curvature in the V direction. Therefore, we get this sort of saddle, right? So we get the mountain peak, or we get the saddle between two peaks along the ridge there, right? Is anybody else getting hungry for Pringles? Anyway, yeah, sorry. So, such a lame nerd. Anyway, so it's really all you have to do is say, I like this one amuses me, and bake it in. Or, you like the other one, and you select that one and bake it in to Rhino. And that's it. Right? I'll just pick this one, why not? Ta-da! And I can close this and lose it forever, right? So about roughly half of you, when I just leave it up to you guys, I usually get roughly half, strangely enough. We'll probably pick this one. The other half will probably pick the other one. Yeah, maybe not exactly, but usually it's good enough for me. And so there's a surface, right? So this is the sort of surface geometry. This is what's going to sort of govern the shape of our grid shell, right? As we start to break it down into structural components, shaping components, etc., right? It's going to form the shape. Really lovely, right? Sort of a patch of a hyperbolic paraboloid, essentially. Right? Sort of a parabola in one direction, swept along the parabola in the other direction, which is gorgeous, right? So you start to understand that geometry can be derived in a number of different ways depending on what you're trying to do, right? What's nice about this is another way of looking at this, you could say a radius swept across another radius, and essentially it's giving us plots, right? Which is great. All right. Not that the other one doesn't either. Let me just bring that up and I'll bake that one in as well just for fun. There we are. We'll give that one a purple one, a violet one, right? So really it's just your choice. Pick one or the other. Ta-da, ta-da. So for today, let's have a vote. Who wants the purple one? Who wants the red one? Who wants the purple one for demonstration today? Maybe your favorite color is purple or violet? It's literally almost half. No, okay, maybe I'll just go with violet since all right. Cool. That begins to reinforce my hypothesis there. Anyway, so we'll go with this. This is more of a dome shape, right? All right. Now, next, shell rib system generation Rhino script, right? So what we've been doing in Grasshopper is essentially like scripting, right? We sort of build a tool that automates things for us, right? Without actually writing code. So we're building a mind map, right? We're doing it visually. It's called visual coding, graphic coding, node-based programming, etc., right? So we've been doing it without having to learn the syntax and the rules of writing scripts. But one of the nice things about things like Revit and Rhino is that you can customize the pucky of them, right? Particularly if you know C#, Python, right, Visual Basic, or some other hosts of programming languages, right? And so this is actually a VB script. This is Visual Basic Rhino script that you can run. It has a .rvb file extension. If you've already downloaded it, you might see it in your downloads folder somewhere. Right? It's a .rvb. I believe it's called, let's see, move up here, surface to gridshell 01.rvb. All right. Now, it's not something that we open in Rhino like a Rhino file, but there is an editor here, just like if we were opening the Grasshopper file, we'd open the Grasshopper editor. Right? We can open up the script editor and run the script file. So let's try that. I'm going to go to the Tools pull down. And I'm going to go to, you can see there's ways to run Rhino scripts, Python scripts, Grasshopper. Then you can actually develop plugins for Rhino. You can develop plugins for Grasshopper, which is a plugin that runs over type of Rhino, right, etc. Right? Or you can talk to Rhino via the API and Visual, Microsoft, whatever that sort of secondary program is, where you can start to run things that, for some reason, it escapes my memory. But anyway. Rhino script, and I'll just say edit, right? So that's what I'm doing. Tools, pull down, Rhino script, edit. And I'll bring up another window. Might take a moment, but it's called Rhino script editor. And I think the last time I ran a Rhino script was probably about a year ago from today, called surface to gridshell.rvb, right? So, but if yours isn't loaded up, you might just have some sample stuff like an option explicit, and then a sub method, and then maybe some stuff down at the bottom, right, where it's saying, it's just inviting you basically to write your own script, and this is how you do it, right? You can see here, instead of going to the variables tab or the branch tab in Grasshopper, you can actually basically define variables with a name. That's what the dim argument is. And then you can start to, instead of using widgets, you can write things like Rhino.getObject, Rhino.getInteger, Rhino.getReal. Those are all asking you to input objects or numbers into the command line. And then it does things like select objects and etc. Right? So we're not going to get into all of the ins and outs here, but you can see that it's doing quite a bit of stuff here. And then there's a series of sub-functions down at the bottom that they're referred to up in the main subtext. All right. It's almost like it's referring to other Grasshopper scripts in order to run the master Grasshopper scripts. So I won't beat you over the head with any more of these weird details, except to say that once you have this loaded file open, you can open that RVB file. There it is. That's what it looks like. You don't really have to write or do anything except run it. That's what that green play button is, which is a throwback to the days of like cassette tape players and VCR players. You guys probably don't even know what that is. Select a surface to populate with tiles. So every time we click something in Rhino, right, we go to the command line and see what it's asking us to do, right? Sometimes it's asking us for an ingredient or a parameter, or it's telling us that there's an error or whatever it is, right? It's usually a pretty good indication of what it wants. You just read the command line. Select the surface to populate with tiles. Yes, that's the point, isn't it? So I select that surface, enter the number of tiles in the U direction. In other words, the number of divisions, right? The number of cells to make the grid in the U and then in the V, right? The number of columns, the number of rows. So I'm just going to say 10, and by default it's already set to 10 for some reason. That's kind of handy. Enter a height for the strip. Now, you could run this and rerun this over and over again. It actually doesn't take very long at all to do, to sort of understand what the height for the strip is, and maybe you need to do that later on, a couple of days from now, if you forget. But what it's referring to is actually the depth of the grid, right? So that's structural depth. I'm going to use 0.5, right? It's assuming that we're going with inches, 0.5 inches, right? So half an inch. You probably don't want to go any less deep than 3/8, right? Half inch is good, 3/4 is fine, 5/8 is okay, right? 3/8 is the smallest. Otherwise, when these things start to notch these things together, it starts to get really like, sometimes they can tear and rip. You don't want that, right? So you want enough material. All right, enter the x distance between envelope strips. So now this is going to give us a three-dimensional version of this shell, this grid. But it's also going to take each of those ribs and then lay them out for us in a nice grid. And so it needs to know, as it enters out, let's say all of the U ribs the X distance between them, right? And so I'm just gonna give it some large number so to make sure that as it lays them out, they're not like overlapping and conflicting with each other, okay? Hopefully. So I'll enter something in like 20, something kind of ridiculously large. And then enter the Y distance between unrolled strips, and I'll just say 36. I'm just gonna give it some numbers. Now, this is really important, enter the material thickness. Why? Because it's gonna put the notches in the right place for you. And those notches need to be the right thickness, right? So you think about the material thickness, you think about two materials slotting together, right? Knowing that material thickness pretty accurately is really important. How many of you have shopped for some chipboard lately? Anybody? What was the thickness? Did it say like 030 or something like that, or 060 or 050?
I don't know. I just looked at this one chipboard.
So you might take it to the laser cutting lab and see if they can mic it for you with the little digital calipers, right? With a micrometer, you can sort of see what that thickness is. Oftentimes when I'm buying, I'll look at the thickness, and if it's 32nd, it's 030. If it's 16th, it's 060 or 050, right? Which corresponds to, 0.0625 is 16th of an inch, 0.125 is 1/8 of an inch. 1/8 of an inch is pretty thick. That might be more than one ply. So I'm just going to enter in something like 0.050 for right now. I'll just make an assumption. I can always rerun this afterwards. I'm going to hit enter. And you're going to see it's going to go through a bunch of stuff. It's not even drawing it while it's going. And then when it's done, this box pops up. But you can see that, ta-da, it's generated this as a set of U and V ribs. And for some reason, they aren't. Yeah, okay, interesting. Some of them are exploded for some reason. And then they've laid them out for us nice and flat. So this must be 20 unit spacing, 20 inch spacing, 36 inch spacing. Not only that, but it's labeled each one for us. Now those labels are really ridiculously stupid. I would probably make my own really quickly after that. But you can see they're labeled, right? So U for one direction, V for the other direction, and then starting the first one is 0, the second one's 1, right all the way up to would be 9, right? So 10 because I made 11 ribs. So I made 10 cells, right? Yeah, it's kind of a mind bender there, but trust me on this. Not only that, but it also gave me the through cuts, right? As well as some things if we wanted to score, and it also gives me the through cuts for each. Wow, all of these things are exploded, which is annoying. Huh, I wonder why. I might relook at that and see if I can find this better script for you. I think this script is just kind of broken since it was developed in like Rhino 5. But nevertheless, this is still a lot easier if you wanted to sort of join that stuff together afterwards. So let me just show you how to do that really quickly, right? So let's look at what it gave us again. First of all, just undo, right? Tools, Rhino script, edit. There it is. Hit green. There's the tile, or there's the surface. 10 in one direction, 10 in the other direction. 0.5 for the sort of depth, structural depth. I'll go with 15 and 25, I don't know. Inch of material thickness, 0.050 in this case. I'm just going to pick a random material thickness. You want to measure your material and be very precise about it. Right, that's where it does all the work for me while I sip my coffee. And then I look at it and go, I either like that or I don't, right? If I don't like it, I can undo it, rerun it, enter in some different parameters, right? So unlike Grasshopper, where I can go back and adjust things before baking, here I run it, I see what I get, I can always undo it or delete it away, rerun it, right? All right. Let's blow up that top view. You can see that it's giving the sort of outer cuts, the V strips and U strips, right? Those are the black outlines. On one layer, it's giving you the green scores. On another layer, it's giving you the red notches on yet a third layer, right? And so if I notice, like when I zoom in here, that some of the notches are exploded, you know what I can do? I can turn this other stuff off. Oh yeah, look at that. So I just have the notches layer on. And I can select them all at once. And I can say, join anything together that can be joined, right? Now it's joined into 77 closed curves, which makes sense, right? 77 is a multiple of 11. We have 11 ribs by 11. Yeah, that makes sense. That checks out. All right, so same thing here. I can turn those off. Turn them off. Boom. Here are my use strips, right? Just the overall through cut. I can select those. Make sure they're all joined and closed, right? So what's interesting about that is if you've ever used a laser cutter, if you have those all split up into a bunch of lines and not just like closed polylines, you might go over and jog and do a cut over here, then jog and do a cut over there, right? Whereas what we want to do is maybe choreograph this enough where it goes, all right, let's score in some labels, let's score in whatever we need, let's add the notches, and then let's do the through cuts at the very end, right? Because the through cuts, you start to actually break a large piece into a bunch of small pieces, right? And if they get blown around, and then you're trying to engrave information on them, you're screwed, right? And you don't want to be foobarred, right? So basically, you want to think about this a couple of steps ahead, right? The fabrication process is such that while you have everything stationary, you want to inscribe all the information on there, right? Then you can cut out the small pieces, then you cut out the large pieces. And that's typically how you do things, right? Okay. Now you might ask yourself, well, if this is U0, which one over here is U0? And so if you select these, what you notice is that all of these, look at that, that says polysurface and it's named. I can go to the layer too, the properties. They've named each of these three-dimensional strips U0, U1, U2, U3, U4. So you can figure out exactly the registration point, right? Where it's coming from, where the U0 is versus the U10, right? So over here must be U0, the first one, right? There it is, polysurface U0. And this one must be U1. There it is, right? Okay, you get the idea, right? So you can begin to, again, sort of understand three-dimensionally how this goes together. And later on, you'll make a drawing, sort of IKEA instruction booklet, for how that stuff works, right? Just like they label the hardware and the pieces, and then they're really particular about which ones go where, right? In which order. You guys will do that. All right. And so you can tell that you're just 1 or 2 steps away from the laser cutter already, right? You could basically laser cut the structural part of the Gridshell and put it together just with this. Now it doesn't have all your componentry that you're going to populate in each cell yet. But let's talk about a few things in a moment, right? So first of all, we're going to assume that since these are following the isoforms, they're going to bend in the planar direction, the sort of flat, the surface direction of these ribs, right? And so we already cut the curvature in one direction, but they're going to have to flex a little bit. If you're having a hard time getting them to flex, these zigzagging green scoring lines are something that you can use. You don't necessarily have to use those, right? But they're there to sort of help you out, sort of make the thing a little more flexible for bending, right? Flexing. That U7, you want to, first of all, it's too large, right, for the piece. 2, it has a bunch of extraneous, redundant, superfluous line work. So you're going to take 3 times longer just to do the engraving than you really need to. So we'll talk about the font to use for that, and then maybe just build your own quick labels based off of these here in just a second, right? So, and then we'll just arrange them and compose them. So let's take a look at that, right? Kyle mentioned the other day that there's a specific font where it does labels like this, both the letters and numbers, with just a single stroke. That'll save you a lot of time, save you a lot of effort. So let me just talk you through that just a moment, right? So this is U1, and so I'm just going to revise this label. I'm just going to make a new one, and I'm going to make sure that I'm set to score. I'm going to go to the text tool, which should pop up a box, and I'm going to use the fonts SLF Rhino Architect, right? I mentioned that and wrote it down on one of the pages when Kyle was here, when he gave his lecture. So if you go to the modules and you look at that date, which I think was a week ago, so last Monday, I wrote that down in case you need to refer back to it. The SLF Rhino Architect, RHN Rhino Architect font. And you're going to pick a size, and I'm just going to say use curve. There. That's a much better label, right? It's small, inconspicuous. I can place it exactly where I want it to be. Right? Whether I want to hide it or want it to show up and be celebrated, I can be consistent with it, right? All right. Am I still recording? Okay, good. Let's see. Now, you notice I picked U15 for some silly reason. I can always redo that, or I can just go back here. Come on now. There we go. And change its, it's grouped together. All right, so I'll just go back and redo this and actually change the text to U0. But you get the idea, right? And so, it doesn't take very long to just go through and do this. Right click to repeat the last command, U1. Get rid of this garbage. Oh, that's annoying. It was exploded. Lame. All right. And on and on and on, right? So U2. Not to be confused with the band or the airplane. And on, right? And I can do that with the V's as well. It doesn't take too long. Trust me, what we just automated, that would take like a week. So it certainly only took 5 seconds. I think you guys can relabel things. I think there's a value proposition here with the scripts, right? It fixed a lot more things than this to do that. So yeah, anyway. Once I have that, I might start to, again, you're going to need to do this. You can either bring these in and insert them or import them into that template file that Kyle made, right? So why don't I do that? Or you can do the opposite and insert or import that into this file. So if you go to, again, I'm just point this out, the modules page. Let's see, laser cutting introduction, right? So there's the website. There's that font in case you need it. There's a template, right, that you can download. So it's right there. But I'm just going to go ahead and just draw an 18 by 32 box. Close. Ta-da! You can then offset that a 1/4 inch in if you need to, or follow the instructions, or just use the template that he already has. The one thing I will say about that template is it does set up the right layer colors for through cuts versus scores. So keep that in mind. They can always adjust those, but you want to use those specific, they're RGB value colors, so they're always a combination of 255 and 0 when it comes to RGB values. I don't know why, it's because it's based on a printer driver of some sort, right? So that's the one thing I'll say about what's nice about that template. But from here, I can just sort of move things around and try to arrange these as best I can to sort of minimize waste and try to get as much stuff in here as I can, right? And again, making sure that I'm moving the labels and everything with these so that I know what's what. I'm not doing a very good job here. Ooh, getting really close. So again, look at that. Template. In fact, why don't I just download it and I'll import it in? That'd be easier. Here, I thought I could shortcut it, but it turns out there's a reason why it's there. Download. There we go. Import from downloads. Yeah, perfect. All right, there we are. So all of this other stuff is junk. Let's see. What's on and off here? There we go. Oh, it's set to white. Yeah. You can always set these temporarily to different color if you'd like, but so in this case, it looks like they have, let's see here. Yeah, they have this sort of through cut set to red, the scoring set to green. So yeah, that actually works pretty well, the way I already have the script set up. Excellent. So again, just rearranging this on the plot. Now that I've turned a bunch of stuff on and off. Okay, there we are. Back to reality here. Okay, so that's getting the ribs ready for laser cutting. And like I said, I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can select all of these objects at once. Maybe. Well, I was going to try to get all these out of the way of each other. What I should have done is pulled these off. So what you'll find is that when you do Rhino scripting and Grasshopper and stuff, like it likes that 0, 0, 0 point. I like putting things in the positive x, positive y quadrant, right? So if you're going to generate stuff like make2d or unrolling and laying things out and that kind of stuff, right? You might want to move your three-dimensional geometry away from that quadrant so that as it starts to lay things flat on the xy plane, you're not getting a bunch of conflicts like I am where I get it. It's hard to sort of understand where what I'm selecting here. But anyway, that's just thinking a couple steps ahead, which I was not doing this morning. Darn. Okay. Let's see. Right. Next. Let's just be methodical here. Back to Canvas. To today. I'll post this video here as soon as we're done. Unrolled shading components example. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open that up so we can take a look at that. Or actually, I think I just posted that so you can see it. But let me just show you first what I'm going to do here, right? And I'll just do basically the same thing I did the other day, which is let me open up Grasshopper again and close this surface classifications. Nope. Open, and whatever oh, come on. Let me just go to recent, maybe. Here we go. Bird's mouth. Yeah, I think I used bird's mouth, right? There we go. Okay. And so here's what you guys were working on over the weekend, right? I mean, I saw some of you guys were really cranking out some Grasshopper stuff. It's pretty interesting. I haven't been on since much earlier this morning, so I'm looking forward to sort of looking at what everybody else has done. But I did have time to sort of look through and grade the first 20 submissions. Last night or this morning, I can't remember. But anyway, what we're doing is we're taking one surface and we're building off of it, right? One sort of quad-shaped surface. And what you're going to do is you're going to take that and you're going to, where is it? There it is. You're going to select that surface. And you're going to tell it the same number of divisions, in this case 10 and 10. And you're going to readjust to the scale here, because this looks like a spiky porcupine of some sort. So something's out of whack. And I suspect it has something to do with this depth that I'm going to. Seems like 10 inches long when the whole thing is not that long. It would be kind of extreme. There we go. You can see that there's so much stuff here, it's kind of getting hard to see. So I'm just going to selectively turn some construction geometry off. Preview selected off. Really carefully here. I just want to make sure that I have certain things turned on and off here. Let's see. Preview selected off. There we go. Now we can just see our birds. In this case, this was the bird's mouth example I was doing the other day, right? So I can make the aperture smaller or larger in several different directions, actually, which is kind of interesting. Yay. And yeah. As well, I can make them deeper or shallower or go with the opposite direction to the interior rather than the exterior. All right. Okay. So what did I do? I inserted this little bit here, right? So originally we just had one little surface, one quad plugged into this, and you build off the vertices and its faces and its edges, right? Instead of just plugging in one, what I'm doing is I'm taking a larger surface, that shell surface, I'm breaking it up into rows and columns, creating a bunch of little checkers in the checkerboard, and then plugging that list in here, okay? So let me just go through that. Pretend this isn't here for a moment, and let's just build it from scratch. So we're taking our old thing, and typically you would have something like this. You would say, here's a surface I'm going to put in. You'd have that plugged in. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take a set of ISO trims, right? So this allows me to give a minimum, maximum latitude coordinates, and then minimum, maximum longitude coordinates, and then the lines that are created, whatever that quad is inside, that gives me just its own separate surface. Now, if I give just one sort of set of latitude lines and longitude lines, I get one surface. If I give it a list of minimums and maximums in both directions, right, then I get a list of surfaces out. And that's what I'm going to do. So what I want to do is I want to take that out, plug this in. Now, I'm just reverse engineering. It wants the surface. That'll be this surface right here. And then it wants a two-dimensional domain, right? Okay? The two-dimensional domain is basically the minimum, maximum, the minimum, maximum. Okay? So a domain is the minimum, maximum. Two-dimensional one means I have minimum, maximum in one direction, minimum, maximum in the other direction. Okay? So I can go to math, and I can say divide two-dimensional domain. And if I think about a surface, it has a minimum, maximum in one direction, and minimum, maximum in the other direction. I can then begin to then divide up in number of times in both directions. I can use that actually as the input for my base domain. Okay, so here's the number of divisions. I'll just add a notepad and just so you can see this. 10 and 10. All right, instead of making one generic quad, I'm going to go ahead and right-click, say set one surface, select the same shell surface that I used to make the rib system, right? Now I also want to use this master geometry in order to create all of these checkers that are going to be populated with my shading components. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in, make sure I'm selecting this purple surface again. Okay, I'm going to plug it in here, I'm going to plug it in there, I'm going to plug in the domain there. Okay, and there we are. Oop. Where'd it go? There it is. Oop. I just wanted to turn the preview off here. There we are. Turn the preview off. A little easier to see now. Right. So now you can see when we bake these components in, if we pick the same number of divisions in U and in V, right, that we did with our Rhino script, you'll see that we can populate each cell also with the shading component. All right. Now, let's open up that file that I gave you for today. Open, downloads, unrolled shading components. Because it does this, right? There's the beginning, right? And there's the U and V directions. I'm just going to go ahead and change those. I know already I'm going to use 10 and 10, right? Oh, yeah. There we are. And I'm going to turn that surface layer back on and right-click and say Set One Surface. There we are. Okay. Now this is a slightly different example. This is just one half of that bird's mouth, right? So it's kind of even more boring of an example. But what's interesting here is that what it does afterwards. So here are, in this case, I only have 2 triangles because this is a really boring example, so it's not nearly as interesting as the ones that you guys are doing. But you'll notice that there's something after, right? So there's something to the right of this. Let me just make these a little more apparent where they are by going over here, making these things a little, there we go, so you can see them a little easier. Right, so what it does is it takes these, tries to join anything together that we can, and then we use an unroll widget. Now, unroll is one of those great tools in Rhino, native Rhino, that we can use, but there is no unroll tool in native Grasshopper. That's why I'm telling you to download and install Lunchbox tools if you can, right? So this Lunchbox tools plugin for Grasshopper, once you install it, it'll add a tab up here called Lunchbox. You'll see that there's a lot of different tools, but one of them happens to be unroll. Okay, and that's where you would get this widget right here. So what does it do? It takes the unrolled version, right? And it's doing several things here. I'll just show you. But one of the things it's doing is it's taking the unrolled version and laying them out in a grid. And then we can adjust the spacing of that grid, which is pretty handy, right here. So if I want to make sure that these things don't overlap, right, and just sort of get them so I can bake them and put them right into the 18 by 32 sheet of chipboard, I can, right? Now, another interesting thing about this is that not only is it giving you that, but it's also giving you, separating out what I would call the score lines, and I can bake those on their own separate layer, versus the through cut lines, which I can bake on the cut layer. Really important, right? Nobody wants to go through and manually start to select all these things and try to like put one on one layer and one on the other layer, right? So you can bake them on specific layers, thinking about the laser cutting process, right? So, you know, obviously you'd want to have it go through and quickly, lightly score each of these, right? To put that full scoring line in there for you. And then afterwards, have it go through and do the through cuts to cut them away as individual pieces, right? And so this is something you can do. All right, so here you'll see that you have edges and things like that. Basically, all of this can be replaced by what you did over the weekend. And then you have the front end, and then you have the back end. Or you can just basically copy and paste the front and the back end into the thing you do that you did over the weekend, right? I mean, I don't have any way of doing this except to say try sooner rather than later. If you have difficulties, on Wednesday is an opportunity in class to get some help. And then, of course, if you try it before the weekend, still, you know, Thursday and Friday are other opportunities maybe to get some quick help if you need from me. It's a lot easier to do that in person, just come to my office or in class, than it is to sort of say, well, although I wouldn't put it past you guys to sort of send me an email right over the weekend, that's perfectly fine. If that's the case, then just be prepared to go back and forth, because I'll probably have some questions and trying to sort of understand where things are going wrong. Okay? All right. So this is a good practice in that you wouldn't necessarily dream this up, but can you follow from left to right and sort of see what's going on and begin to tweak things one way or the other, combining your stuff with some of the automated stuff, or laying things out and flattening them, unrolling them, and then also populating an entire field of cells with your shading component rather than just one cell. Okay, so that's it. All right, so should I do this from the beginning and go through it step by step and get everything, and I'll end with a set of laser cutting files? Hot damn. All right, great. Perfect. Can't wait. So happy. All right, close. Delete. All right. The original grasshopper file, which one? Should I do the red one now instead of the purple one? Why not, right? Okay. So I'll go with red. Close. All right, delete. Blown away, exploded, evaporated. Only red's left. All right, so first things first, let's automate the rib system here. All right, so I need to run that Rhino script, right? So let's generate the structure, right? Again, tools pull down, Rhino script, edit. That'll bring up the Rhino script editor. Right. Now, it's already remembers the last thing I ran here. If you need to pull up that RVB file, right? File, open, go to your downloads folder or wherever you drag that to, open it up, okay? It'll show up here, ready to run. I'm gonna hit the green button, say run script. The script editor disappears, Rhino shows up, and it's gonna ask me some things in the command line, right? It's running that script, just as if the script was a tool over here, right? Which you can actually do, by the way. You can actually make your own macros and scripts and then make a little shortcut button for them on the toolbar, which I've done in the past, but I don't even bother now. Select a surface to populate with tiles. Well, it seems like this would be the one that I'm gonna select. The number of tiles in the U direction, right? The number of cells or divisions, 10 and 10. Enter height for the strip, that's the structural depth, right? I'll say 0.5 for half of an inch. Enter the X distance between unrolled strips. So as it starts to take all the U's and unroll them along the X axis and lay them out, right? The spacing in between to make sure that they're not overlapping too much, right? And so I'm just gonna pick something, I'll just say 20, I don't know. Hopefully that's enough. And for the Y distance, I'll say 30 and hit enter. And then material thickness, very important. Again, I'm gonna stress this again and again. You really need to understand what the material thickness of the material you're gonna laser cut is before you run the script and enter that number in, right? So I'm just going to generically say 0.050 and assume that it's somewhere between a 32nd and a 16th inch. I don't know what yours will be until you buy it and understand what that thickness is, okay? I hit enter at that point, and it does all my work for me, which I find incredibly satisfying, always. All right, so there's a couple of things I'm gonna do here, but one of them is I'm just going to go ahead and reestablish these layers. So I'll just hurry up and quickly do this, try to, and do it for all of them. Right, I have the score layer as my active layer, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this on the score. And I'll go ahead and start by just re-entering these labels. There's U1. I did U0 just a second ago. Annoyingly, this one is actually, oh, come on. A good craftsman removes crappy tools, right? Okay, so anyway, 01, 02, there we go, okay. I'm trying to be quick, and for some reason, Windows does not want to be quick for me at the moment. Like, what's the hell's the deal here? There we go, all right. 03, these are really spaced apart, so I guess that's cool. 04, and I'm just going to quickly, again, as quickly as possible anyway, replace all of these really clumsy, old, crappy labels with something that's going to be both more appropriate in size and also in the actual typeface itself to minimize the amount of cutting and jogging that the laser cutter needs to do, which doesn't seem that substantial until you start adding them up cumulatively. It makes a big difference over time, especially when you have a lot of things to cut. Okay. U7. And again, I'm just doing this just to demonstrate, really, I mean, this is something that you have to sit there and do and take, 10 minutes or whatever. Because I do want to have finished vector information ready to laser cut here when I'm done. So we can go ahead and prepare literally everything for that. I'm not even going to worry about that last thing because it's going to cut this away and it'll be just fine. Let's see, U8. U9. This is painful watching me like move around, isn't it? Okay. Let's see, U10. There we are. At long last. We're at the end of this row. All right, ready to do the V's. V10. In V9 and V8. So again, just very quickly but carefully making sure I'm selecting the right things to delete away here. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of this. V8. This is annoying how this thing is moving around. Okay, so there we go. Let's see, back to the text tool, V7. Counting down. V6, right here. Oops. It's annoying when these things are actually exploded into curves. You have to like delete each curve away one by one. V5. Still not as annoying as trying to do all this manually. V4. V3. Almost there, V2. I feel like the Count from Sesame Street. V1, All right, last but not least, V0. Let's get rid of this bad boy and put that last. Get rid of that, V0. Okay. Yay. All right, so a couple of things here. Now I'm going to turn some things on and off just to make sure I have things closed up and joined together. So let's go ahead and turn some of these things off. And I'm just going to turn that off. There we are. So if I want all these score lines, I'm just going to make sure that they're all joined together. That way they don't take forever. Yeah, 206 curves joined into 62 open curves. That works better. The reason why there's 62 is because we're also dealing with the labels that we just made. So I can turn the cut on and turn that off. These are going to be all the notches. I can go ahead and select all of those and join those together. Just make sure that they're joined. There we are. Same thing with these. So the V strips, I just want to make sure I select only the stuff I want to select here. Not the 3D versions, the ones off in 3D space, but everything else here. So just bear with me. There we go. And just hit join. I just want to make sure that they're all joined and closed together. There's a closed curve, there's a closed curve. 22 curve points, 9 curves. 8 curves. Yep, there we go. One closed curve, cell, closed curves. Yep. All right, and then same with the U strips. I'll just go ahead and turn those, the V strips off and select the U strips. Then I'm just going to select them all at once, hit join. Okay, there we go. Now all of those are joined together into closed curves. Now I can turn all these things back on. I can start to arrange them. All right, and what I'm going to do first is I might just move these off to the side here. Because I know that my unrolled stuff is going to also be put on this XY plane, so might as well just get all this stuff out of the way while I have a shot at it. Just try to get all of these notches really quickly. I forgot to move my 3D model out of the way again. Bad, Professor Vermillion. All right, so let's see. I'll go into top view and just make sure I move everything all at once and just right out of the way there. Hopefully everything moved with it. Looks good. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and move this out of the way while I'm thinking about it. So I'll move this out over here. Both the original surface and the rib, the sort of ribs going in opposite directions. All right, so let's see. 11 o'clock, we're doing great. All right. Grasshopper. So I have cut and score. I also have the through cuts. Yeah. So let's see, grasshopper. And now I'm going to open this up. All right. This is the unrolled shading components. So this already has the unrolled. This assumes, so this thing will turn red or it'll give you a big question mark here. It'll say like, I don't know what that is. If you don't have that plugin installed, right? So you'll sort of come to an abrupt stop there until you run this on a system that has that Lunchbox Tools plugin installed, okay? But here's where, again, this is the sort of specific, like, hey, let's take the vertices, edges, and faces, and let's build something off of them, right? All the way until we join them together, okay? So that's what you need to sort of tweak. But once you do that, you should be able to plug in the surface, set one surface. Let's make sure I select this red one right here. Oh yeah, look at that. Pure goodness there. So there's a couple of things, right? While I have this up, I want to go ahead and start to adjust these, and height. Let's make this a little spikier, let's say. Okay, there we go. I can always make a new layer here, or maybe I'll just pick layer 4, and I'll go over here, and I'll take the joined versions, and I'll just say bake them in, the 3-dimensional versions into my Rhino, so I have them. Right, that'll be important when I do make 2Ds and make a sort of exploded axon on this bad boy later, towards the end of the project. And then I can always just turn that layer off. Okay. But now I can go to the unrolled, I can follow this around, and let's look over here. You can see that there's several things going on here, hopefully. Oh dear. I might have given you the wrong thing, because what I don't see are labels for these. And that's really important. So maybe I'll maybe I'll reissue this right after class. If so, I'll change the link around for you to one that actually generates labels for you as well in places like there, because that's really important. But essentially, when you look at this, right, you understand that these are just the unrolled versions of those sort of folded cheese grater-like sort of half pyramids. Okay, so from here I can say, okay, let me pick the score layer. I'm going to go ahead and select that as the active layer. I'm going to go ahead and just pick the score lines here. I'm going to right-click and bake them. I'm going to make sure that I'm baking them into that score layer. All right. Now I'll pick the cut layer, and I'll pick the outlines, the sort of lines around everything and make sure I bake those into the cut layer. Right? I'm missing the labels. If you wanted to manually add them here, right, you could say like, you know, think about them as a Excel spreadsheet. Think about letters in one direction, numbers in the other, and then A1, A2, A3, A4, all the way to, you know, Z26 or however many of these you have. Actually, I guess it would be J10, right? Because 10 by 10. And I just happen to know that J is the 10th letter of the alphabet because it's the first letter of my name. I'm weird. All right. So now with all of this stuff baked in, my last task is to begin to format this, make sure it's formatted and arranged for laser cutting, right? So this is where I can actually begin to import. I can import that laser cut template. There it is. Oh yeah. So you can see that it has that outline and then also the margin, that dashed line around the outline. So that outline is 18 by 32 inch box meant to simulate the bed of the laser cutter, right? That margin just gives you a little bit of wiggle room, right? Because sometimes it's not completely lined up with the registration in the corner. Because what they can do is they can pull the bed out. And so when you put your material into the bed, right, it's good to have just a little bit of a grace, you know, eighth or maybe even a quarter of an inch around that. That's what that dashed line is. If you can keep it inside of that, you can prevent most errors, or say that piece that actually goes off the side and isn't completed. Those, when I deselect, will disappear only because they're sort of white, right? So if you look at these labels, material borders, margin, those are all set to white. So I'll just go ahead and just change them to something where we can see them temporarily and hit OK. Right now you can see those now. The labels, I'll go ahead and turn those as well to just this sort of violet, just so you can sort of see. So that's what that template looks like. As you can see, I've managed to move my three-dimensional model into the way of the template. Right, of course. Right, why wouldn't it? Of course, do not cut, make 2D. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all this other stuff. This is just the example stuff that they're giving, all these sort of weird shapes. You can see that they're also labeled and have a bunch of holes for dowels and things like that to sort of stack up a pancake model, it looks like. Just get rid of those. Come on now. There we are. Get rid of that dude. What? All right. And maybe I'll just move this one out of the way yet again. All right, so when it comes to this laser cutting stuff, right, this is essentially what we're dealing with. You can say sheet 1, look at this. This is gorgeous. Go ahead and expand the top view so you can see a little easier, right? So what I would do is I would arrange this stuff here. So one of the ways I can quickly do that, let's see. I'm just gonna go ahead and get rid of this stuff. This is really driving me crazy. I don't really even need that label, but at any rate, right, I can begin to sort of compose this stuff into 18 by 32 sheets. Maybe I need to rotate this. So instead of being in portrait orientation, it's in landscape orientation. I can do that if these things are labeled and I can remember which ones are which, right? Becomes quite easy, actually. The laser cutter doesn't really care what's top and bottom. Does that actually fit inside? Pretty close. Good enough for me. Boom. Nice. I can always make a copy of this over here. And again, it's about, I think, really carefully just sort of moving these things over into place and then trying to arrange them in an order that makes sense and that maximizes material use. So sometimes that might involve rotating these around like this, so that you can begin to, just gonna turn ortho off. Ah, really? Here, let me just disable object snap. That's really driving me crazy. So as these things get larger, we can begin to nest them together. And again, it doesn't matter how close they get, honestly, as long as they don't overlap. And if you can fit these on 2 or 3 or maybe 4th sheet, but hopefully in just 2 or 3 sheets, right? Then you're in good shape. You know, maybe I'm not taking my time enough to sort of find an optimal way of organizing these, but you know, again, I'm just trying to get everything prepped so at the end here, let's see. So, right, and then we have these as well. Make sure I select all of them here. Just going to turn these upwards a bit, make them a little easier. Oh, you know what? I might just, actually, turn them around like this so that they nest easier with the others as well. There we go. That makes more sense. Ah, come on. Right, so you get the idea. And I'm just sort of slowly moving these into place, trying to sort of, again, maximize the yield of my sheets of chipboard for both economic and ecological reasons, right? Oh, I'm really close to getting all of these on 2. And if I thought about rearranging some to put some here and trying to figure out if I can get 1 or 2 on this one, ooh, that would be worth it probably, to avoid having to cut down yet another 18 by 32. And you can see the offcuts are pretty odd, so when you have these sort of curved geometries. So that's something to keep in mind. See if I can fit 1 or 2 in here. Oh yeah, look at that. Oh, easy peasy. All right. There, right? Now I'm ready to take this in and say, well, you know, I want the green go first, the red go next, the black go last, right? Red and black are through cuts, green is square. And this is thickness of chipboard, you can see it here. It's already been cut down to by 32. Okey-doke. So it might take a little longer for, especially the first time around, like longer than 15 minutes for you to do this, right? But you can see the roads part, right? That's sort of like just doing repetitive tasks has been largely automated for you, right? That's to empower you to then prototype this once, then we can start to look at its performance, prototype it again. Okay. And by that second prototype, it's going to be perfection with capital P. Ideally. All right. Any quick questions? Try this out. Now again, I did mention that there was a file towards the end that sort of unrolling the, laying out the component pieces, right? And we're using the unroll tool from Lunchbox Tools. I might reissue that file for you guys between now and Wednesday. Okay, if so, I'll let you know, and I'll of course replace that file. But first of all, I would just download the files. Now, make sure that Grasshopper file works for you to open the sort of sine wave escape, right? Now, see if you can bake something in. Try the Rhino script file and see how that works, right? You might have to rerun it a couple of times anyway. I mean, it only takes a few seconds to run, right? But just double check, make sure it works. Try downloading that Lunchbox Tools plugin and installing it. Make sure that's working, right? If not, on Wednesday, I can take a look at why it's not working with you, hopefully, okay? Right, so try to be prepared so that Wednesday we can just debug and you can get work done, okay? Sound good? All right, great. Well, then I guess we're out of here with 1 minute to spare. I'll see you on Wednesday. Great. Yeah. Let's see.